I just interviewed him for the podcast, but I'm reading this book called Nasty, Brutish, and Short, Adventures in Philosophy with Kids by Scott Hershkowitz. It was really good. Anyways, he'll be on the podcast soon. I'm really excited to talk to all of you. We're going to kick some stuff around here at the beginning and then go right into the Q&A, which is what I really wanted to talk about. Obviously, we call this the Read to Lead Challenge, which is built around this idea from Harry Truman that while not all readers are leaders, all leaders have to be readers. And I think it's really interesting to think about Harry Truman as a lover of books. He's one of the last, perhaps the last American president to not go to college. But he has this moment as a young man. He gets sick. He has like a bacterial infection and he spends all this time in the hospital. And that's where he starts reading. He couldn't watch TV in the hospital then. He falls in love with books and it changes his life. He reads everything he can get his hands on, including Marcus Aurelius as it happens. And I think we've written about this for the email before. There's like a handful of passages that we know struck him from Marcus Aurelius because he wrote them down and took notes on them, which sort of leads me to the second thing, which we're going to talk a lot about in this challenge. It's not just that you read, it's also what you read. But I would also put on top of that, it's how you read. So what is the practice by which we consume these books? How do we organize? How do we collect that knowledge? How do we consume that knowledge? Then how do we find ways of applying and using that knowledge? That's where the Commonplace book comes in. I'm working on my next book right now. And these are the stack of note cards that I did today for that book and the book that comes after. So we could talk about all of that in today's chat. A couple quick housekeeping notes before we get into it. Number one, please mute your line while you're not calling. You can raise your hand. If you see this over in the reactions section, you can raise your hand and then I will call on you. We send out an archive of this to everyone. So if you miss something or you want to watch it again, or you can't come to one of the future ones, there will be an archive. So look out for that. But because there is an archive and this is being recorded, I feel like it's worth pointing out that if you don't want to be included in said archive, just turn off your video and you can even change your name in your Zoom settings if you want. But those are the ideas. We'll take a bunch of questions. You can also put the questions in the chat. It looks like a lot of people are also recommending some books, which is cool. We'll talk about whatever you guys want, but I'm really just looking forward to kicking things around with all of you and talking about pretty much my favorite thing to talk about in the whole world, which is books. And we'll get right into it. Kayla, you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Ryan.
Of course.
Big fan.
Thank you.
So my question is about focus.
Yeah.
I found that I used to be a huge reader growing up, but I feel like with the smartphones, it's hard for me to get into a rhythm in a book before my attention is diverted in some way. So I'm wondering do you have an area that you like to read? Do you like keep your phone away from you? Like, what are the types of things that you do to stay focused with your attention on what you're doing and what you're reading?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think it is the perennial problem of our time. There's actually a great book about this called The Shallows by Nicholas Carr. And he's talking about how the way that technology has sort of changed our minds or incentivized us to think about things, it makes it really difficult to concentrate for extended periods of time, to lock into stuff. And this book was written like 10 years ago, so it's only gotten worse. I would say one of the reasons, like people ask me, what do you think about audiobooks? What do you think about ebooks? I'm not like snooty or pretentious, like whatever works for you is what you should use. But the two big reasons that I don't consume much in the way of digital books, number one is it doesn't work as well for me for my note-taking process. But two, I'm trying to be away from the screen as much as possible. And so even if that screen is a Kindle, I think there is something to be said about sitting with a physical book, holding it. It's like putting on comfortable clothes after being dressed up or something. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's a transition into a different thing. So I'm that's why I'm almost always physical when I read. I even like if I'm going to read a long article, like let's say it's some like, I don't know, 10,000 word New Yorker piece that maybe I'm researching for one of my books or something, I'll physically print out the article. I don't really get magazines because I try not to read that much news, but like, even if it's something that's more than a couple hundred words, like in text, I usually like to print it out. So I'm not tempted to be distracted. And I can, I feel like the act of sitting down at a table, with a pen or something to drink and whatever is a way to do it. So I guess that's part of my process. I don't have like a specific place that I read so much anymore, if only because my kids just sort of have taken over my house. But I try to, what are some strategies I have as I'm thinking about this? I like to listen to music when I read. I find that it helps me tune out other things. It helps me lock in. I usually read a lot when I'm traveling. So like I was on 3 or 4 planes last week. So I do a lot of reading then. Try not to watch TV or do other things while I'm flying. I just read. I like to read before bed. I like to read while I eat also. Like one of the rules at our table is we try not to allow phones or screens at the table. But if you want to read a book, like by all means. So I try to do it in that sense. One other recommendation as far as focus goes, The Shallows being one, and we'll put all these books in the links as well. But The Shallows is great, and then Cal Newport's book Deep Work is very good on the subject of focus. So is his book Digital Minimalism, and then Nir Eyal wrote a book called Indistractable that I would also recommend as well. Nick.
Hey, Ryan, how's it going?
Hi, good.
Hey, good to see you again. Thank you so much for this challenge, man. This has like really been great. I have 2 questions. One is a little technical. I'm trying to do my best Ryan Holiday and James Clear impression, and I'm starting to read and do blogging on it. So I'm very new at this, only a couple months in. So the technical question is this: what I've been doing, and I get the feeling you're not going to like it, but I'll throw it out there. I read physical books, or I've actually been doing the same, but printing out articles and reading them on paper. I underline or highlight, and then the newer iPhone app or update has the ability to take pictures and scan text.
Yeah, it's sort of, you get those little brackets around it when it recognizes text. Yeah, sure.
So I've been doing that for, and then sending it to a Google Doc. And I find the digital, for me, again, I'm new at this, but it's helpful to do, like, be able to do searches and go and find things a little bit quicker when I'm on my laptop writing blogs or doing articles and stuff like that. And after your email on Tuesday, I decided to sort of challenge myself and start handwriting it out as well in my commonplace book, which, has been collecting webs. And I'm finding actually I'm new at this for the last week, but I'm finding doing both is actually helpful. It's a little bit more time, but it's helpful when I go to write the article, it's easier to grab it. And then it's sinking in more where I can recall the comment or the little piece that I came across a little bit quicker because of the handwriting. So any thoughts on that? Both? Should I kick one or the other?
There is no should here. There's whatever works for you, right? These are going to be suggestions as you go through the challenge. These are strategies, ideas. If you do all of them, you're probably following what we're talking about literally. It should be, hey, I got a handful of things out of this that I use, if that makes sense. So when I do my note cards, I usually do most of them by hand. Sometimes I use a Sharpie, sometimes I use a pen. I like doing them here, but I found my handwriting has gotten more and more atrocious as I've gotten further and further away from elementary school. Because pretty much the only things I write by hand are like my signature, my to-do list, and these note cards. So I'm getting worse at it. So when I get to really big passages, I stop writing them down and I usually type them out. So like, here's 5 or 6 sheets of paper from a book that I just went through, where I had to type up a big passage. 1, so I'm not introducing errors into the process. 2, so it will literally fit on a note card because I can get it smaller. But ultimately, to me, I want to have the interaction with the text in a way that's more than just copying and pasting. I feel like interacting with it in some way is really, really important. Someone told me you could just print these directly on the note cards, but honestly, that would require a certain amount of technical expertise that I just do not have. And I hate computer printers because they're all just awful. So it's easier for me just to print it and then cut it out and tape it or glue it or whatever to a note card. But I feel like the process of engaging with it in some way is really, really important. There's a whole, I've talked about this before, but there's a lot of examples of writers who, to get inspiration, would just write passages from other books. There is something too about, if you're trying to get good at writing, if you're trying to really understand what the writer's saying, having their words come through your fingers, either with a pen or through the keyboard, there is something really powerful about that, that I've benefited from as well.
That's fantastic, Ryan. Thank you. Very helpful.
Thanks. That's funny. Someone's saying that the Field Notes motto, they make really good little notepads that say, I'm not writing it down to remember later, I'm writing it down to remember it now. The point is, by writing it down, you're getting something out of the process. That's great. Somebody said, how do I not get overwhelmed when choosing my next book? How do I choose? I mean, there is this thing called the paradox of choice, which says as you have more options, decisions tend to get harder, not easier. I think my solution is pretty simple. I don't think that much about it. Like, it isn't something that I'm, what am I going to read? Is it going to be the right book or whatever? I kind of just go where my heart or my brain or my interests take me. I just go from book to book, like George of the Jungle, from vine to vine. Like, you're reading something, and then as soon as you finish, you're starting the next one. Obviously, we can only read so many books in our lives. And so there is an opportunity cost to every book that you read, of course. But I think the way to tackle this is not by hemming and hawing over each book you choose to read. It's by quitting bad books quickly. So I pick up the book, I start reading it. If I'm not getting something out of it, if I find that it's incorrect or whatever, I give it a little bit of space. The rule I like, and I think we have this in the challenge, is 100 pages minus your age, because as you get older, you should suffer fools less gladly. And so I quit books quickly, and I not only don't feel bad about quitting a book, but like, almost even the books that I quit, I've still gotten something out of. So I'll have 1 or 2 notes. So like, these are a stack of books here that I've read that I have to go through. And some of these books I read all of, some of these books I read 20 pages of, and some of these books I read 150 pages of. But if I've gotten one thing out of it, I count myself lucky. So that's how I think about that. I wouldn't sweat it. There's too many great books out there to spend time, hemming and hawing. I just say go for it and move on. Mohsen, hi.
You got it.
There we go.
All right. So thank you for the opportunity.
Of course.
Just wanted to ask a couple of questions around your reading routine after the day 1, day 2 of the emails. I almost agree with the speed reading part of it. I took courses on that, and I was worried about finishing the book faster versus understanding what it was saying.
Sure.
So my question to you is, how much in time do you read per day? Meaning, the first book was Truman, the second was Power Broker in both of your videos, and you said Truman you finished in 1 week, Power Broker you finished in 2 weeks. It's going to take me 6 months to finish Power Broker. I mean,
Sure.
it's like this thick book. And then you are interacting with the text as well. You're
Sure.
taking notes, you're doing all that stuff. So it's not like digital, which is, I'm just skimming. So I want to
Sure.
understand, are you taking it as literally as your job, like reading 6-7 hours per day, like Warren Buffett? Like, what are you doing?
So
Give me some hope.
I definitely don't read 6 to 7 hours per day, but I do take it as my job because it literally is my job, right? If I don't read, like I was reading this book because I interviewed this guy an hour ago. I read professionally because I write professionally, right? But even before then, I took reading quite seriously. I would read on the weekends. I would read after work. I would read at work if no one was paying attention, right? So I spend a lot of time doing it. I would say I'm probably quicker than average at reading, but by no means a speed reader. I just put a lot of time into it. Look, I read The Power Broker in 2007 or something. I had more time. In 2022, with 2 kids and multiple businesses and the books, it would take me longer to read The Power Broker, for sure, right? But I do find that when I really love a book, I will spend a lot of time reading it and I will get through it very quickly. So one note on this challenge, obviously this challenge is going to go over a number of weeks. Originally, if people are doing it for a second time, originally it was just 1 email a day for like 2 weeks. The idea is not if I'm like, you should read The Power Broker, and then 3 days later, I'm like, you should read Titan or something. I'm definitely not saying you should have finished The Power Broker by now. Like, these are suggestions for you to note down and read at your leisure. But there's only, obviously, what we're trying to give you is a practice or a way of thinking about books. We're compressing the period of instruction, but the application process should unfold more slowly over time.
Do you skim or maybe skip the book to a certain chapter or something if it interests you or no?
That's you. If I find myself doing that, that's a sign I will probably be quitting that book soon. But I'm kind of giving the author a second chance. Maybe they stumbled. I do find, sometimes if I've read a lot about a topic, like for instance, I just read a book that was like a series. I just read this book. It's a series of interviews from Judd Apatow on comedians. There were some people in the book that I just didn't care about, and so I didn't read their chapters. Right? I really enjoyed the book, but there's no rule that says I have to care about every interview, right? And if that person hadn't been included, I wouldn't have felt the book was insufficient. So I do jump around from time to time, but if I'm doing it too much, it's probably a sign that it's not a good book.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Somebody's asking about used books. I enjoy used books. I buy them all the time, usually on Amazon, because a lot of the books that I have to read or I'm looking for are no longer in print. So like, what's an example? Do I have any old ones? Like, this is an interesting book. This is one of the first self-help books ever written by this guy, Samuel Smiles. His actual first book was called Self-Help, but like, this is cool. This one's called Duty, but if you can see here, there's actually like leaves pressed in this book, and it was published in 1888. So they're not really any new copies of this one. So I do buy used books. I'll buy them on Amazon. Every once in a while, I'll find myself in a used bookstore, and I pick them up. At my bookstore, I only sell new books. The margins on used books are not great, and the inventory is often quite overwhelming. And the funny story, even though we don't sell used books, and we definitely don't buy used books, people just bring used books here all the time and just leave them. They'll be like, here are this giant box of books, which then they're basically saying like, here, you take these to Goodwill, which I then have to do. So if you ever come to my bookstore, please don't do that. And then somebody else was asking if this is a book about Chesty Puller, which yes, it is. I used him in the Courage book, and then he's going to be in the Self-Discipline book. Actually, Jocko Willing told me about that book. And then his son wrote a book called Fortunate Son about his experiences in Vietnam that won the Pulitzer Prize. It's a tragic, quite sad book, but a different Very different story than Chesty, but I quite enjoyed both of them. Conway.
Hey, Ryan. Good to
Hi.
see you. Thank you so much.
Of course.
As always. So I'm still roughly 70 years old, according to your little worksheet.
Yeah.
I've got roughly another 10 years to go. Looking at my family, it might be 13, but
all right.
Give it.
How are you going to spend that time reading?
Yeah, so several questions about it. So I've been journaling for years.
Yes.
And putting my quotes and things that I like in my journal.
Yes.
And then I was tagging them. So to pre-COVID, I had a business, so I would go back and I was doing public speaking. So that seemed purposeful, but I sold my business. I'm fully retired, which is fortunate. So I quit doing it. It didn't make sense to me. So my first question, am I missing the point? Should I go back and start doing that again?
Sure.
And then secondly, according to your worksheet, I've got as I've gotten older, I've become a slow reader. So I got 132 books to go. I started during COVID reading for pleasure more than purposeful reading. But is there any guidance or thoughts that you might have on that one? And then I didn't bring a book up here, but I write all over I write on the margins. I underline. I just trash a book.
I love it.
Nobody ever wants to read after me. Is that like disrespectful to the book?
No, absolutely not.
So those are the three questions.
People will sometimes come up at events and go like, I loved your books. Would you please sign my copy? This book changed my life. It's my favorite book or whatever. And then they'll show me the book and I'll see no evidence of that fact, right? It'll be pristine. My favorite books I have torn to pieces, right? Because I've read them multiple times. I engage with them. They're covered in food. I've spilled on them. The covers beat to crap because I've carried it around with me. I think reading should be a two-way conversation. And it is actually a sign of respect to write in the book. It's like showing that you're paying attention. So I wouldn't feel guilty about that at all. I love it. As far as the reasons to collect quotes and ideas or whatever, I mean, is there a professional impact? Of course. Is it an advantage professionally? I think so. But we read to be better as people also. And you never know when you might want to turn to one of those things. So I think if you're just doing it so you have anecdotes to put in your talks, you're probably doing it wrong. I write notes about being a better parent, about being a better person, about things that inform my political beliefs, things that make me think about what it is to be a human being. So it may just be for you that you're pivoting from what you're noting and collecting towards use in your life as opposed to use in your career. But these are great questions. Thank you. Naomi is saying about building a physical library and then sorting. I have less thoughts on how to build your library other than buy books that you like and read them. But I think that organizing your books by color should be a criminal offense. I find that I really dislike that. I will say, in nature of full disclosure, there is a bookshelf in the bookstore that when we were moving my library, someone who works for me organized by color, and we sometimes use it to film in front of. But I find it very disruptive and annoying, and I can never find anything I want in them. I organize my books, excepting the ones behind me, which are books that I've read recently and I'm using usually in some way and just haven't put back in a different spot. I organize my books by theme and then descending order by height. That's that's my sort of idiosyncratic way to do it. But I think theme is a much better way to do it. Sometimes people go, oh, they're alphabetized. And that just also strikes me as insane unless you work in a library. But look, there's really no right or, I'm just joking. There's no right or wrong way to do this. Organize your books however you like. Juan.
Huge fan. Thank you.
Hi. Yes.
So I was a very slow reader. I took Jim Quick's, so some people who asked, Jim Quick's class.
Yes.
I went from 254 words per minute to about 750 in 3 weeks.
Okay.
And so in 2019, I had a friend of mine challenge me to read 15 books in 90 days. I thought that was insane, but I actually read 16. I thought, oh, wow, I can actually do this. So, and ever since then, I've been reading about 58 books per year. The issue I've had is, here's an example. Here's what I do. There's notes all in this page. When I highlight something, I'll go back to this page and just write like a little bullet, like remember this,
sure,
and go back. My problem has been, and I'm getting the gist of it from some of the comments people make, is how do you take that information and make it valuable in the long term?
Yeah.
Like I see these quotes, but unless I go back and actually look at this book and read it, goes back on my shelf and I'm like, I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering.
So my process is I read the book and then I put it usually here. And then every day or so, I wait a couple of weeks, but almost every day, unless I'm very busy, I'll try to go back through one book that I've read recently. And I try to transfer that information out of the books into what I call my commonplace book. So that's transferring the ideas to a note card. Other people do this digitally, as I understand. So Conway was just showing the little journal he has. But I think the idea is you read a book, the book is 300 pages, and maybe there's 10 pages or 10 passages in that book that you really struck you, that you feel taught you something or maybe a value in the future. To me, the idea is you got to get that out of the book into some centralized place. So not just so you can then look in that centralized place, but also the process of going back over it a second time to write it down or take a picture of it or copy and paste it or whatever it is. That is the process by which then you are really remembering it. And I would argue that for you, if you are speed reading, this sort of review process of the greatest hits of the book is going to be extra important because you're zipping through at a clip that's probably faster than most people.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Somebody's asking, how do I decide to keep or get rid of a book that I enjoyed? I usually keep all the books that I read unless it was like, I lose it or something. And then every once in a while when I'm moving or I need space, I will, with the distance of a lot of time, decide, okay, I definitely will never use this again, or I'm embarrassed that I have this in the first place. And then I will get rid of it. But I don't know. I don't think anyone else should make that decision for you. If you feel like keeping it, keep it. If you're a minimalist and you don't want it taking up space in your house, don't let it take up space in your house. But I'm more of a maximalist when it comes to keeping books. Is that Istvan? I don't know how to pronounce that.
Hey, it's Istvan.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So my question is that I just finished my first book and I used
you're writing?
Yes, I am. And
okay.
I really enjoy it. So I used several commonplace books and I'm really curious about how do you outline the chapters and how do you categorize each chapter for a new book?
When I'm writing, you mean?
Yes, when you're writing.
So like, I'll give you an example. So I will probably in about the next 3 or 4 weeks get started on my next book. I'm doing this book on the 4 virtues. So I've already written one on courage. I've written a book on self-discipline, and then the next one is justice. So I have been loosely researching this book on justice for the last 2 years as I've written the other book. So I have lots of note cards, here, like, let's see. here's one on wisdom, which will be the next book. Here's one on justice, which will be this, or the book after justice, justice, justice. So I start by just very vaguely, or just very generally collecting stuff that I think I might use. And then the longer I do that, I start to get a sense of, like, this one says part 2, because I have some sense of how I'm going to distinguish the 3 parts, although I'm not sure. But really, for the last 2 years, I've just been collecting and collecting. And then when I sit down to get started on this book, the first probably 2 or 3 weeks of that writing process will be me just going through the cards, getting rid of some that turned out were dead ends, but starting to identify or organize them into patterns that will form the parts and the chapters of the book. So first, you're casting a very wide net, then you're pulling all the stuff onto the boat, and then you're going through it and you're getting rid of the garbage or the bycatch. You're throwing that back in the ocean, and then you should have, after you've done that, a really clear sense of, like, here's most of what's going to go in the book, and then here are the different buckets that I've got to go fill up because I don't have enough.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Someone's asking when this next book comes out. The discipline book will come out at the end of September of this year, and I am not sure about the one after that because I have not written one word of it. Gonzalo, sorry, you were muted there for a sec.
Sorry.
Hi.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I have a question about your note cards and your commonplace book and how to classify them.
Sure.
What I understand from what you do, you put them in your box, and your box is by themes or subjects,
Yes.
like justice, courage, whatever. But do you also index them? Because I'm thinking, like, if you have a big category like justice, there are a lot of subcategories within. You keep like a separate index, or you just have it all clumped together, and then you just got to get them out and kind of find what you want. Or there's an easy way to find, especially in the long term, let's say a
Sure.
year after you make the cards, how do you remember where they were?
So I would say it's different for me if I'm just collecting. Like, I have sort of a box that's like just for me, just stuff that I'm interested in, that I like. And then when I'm researching for a book. But if you take, for instance, The Obstacle is the Way started as just a collection of note cards about obstacles that eventually got spun off into its own book. But like Justice, right now I have a box that's just filled with all the cards that I have tagged as Justice. But as I sit down next month to get serious about the book, the subcategorization is the whole process. So, okay, what stuff should I talk about in the intro? That will be a section. What stuff, is more like the conclusion? And then what's everything in between there? And so it's a process of slicing it thinner and thinner and thinner and organizing it around that. And then usually by the end of a book, there's a huge collection of stuff that I didn't use, or that as I was researching, I didn't know what category it went in. But now that the book exists, I, like the last couple of weeks, as I've been putting the finishing touches on the temperance book, it's, this card, actually, it has something that I'm going to go tag on to the end of this chapter. So it's kind of an ad hoc structure. But the more structure you create, the more structure accumulates.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see. All right, Ashray.
Yes, hello, Ryan.
Hi.
So currently I was reading your book, this Perennial Seller.
Yes, Perennial Seller.
Yeah. And I like the idea of how we need to get in love with the process and not only the result.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask a question. So what questions you are trying to find answer to when you are reading books, especially like Stoicism? Of course, you read a lot from the point of view of writing something or giving matlab helping others. But from personal point of view, what questions or themes you are interested in personally, or is there something like you are finding answers to in these books, especially like Stoicism?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something I think about because it can be very easy to see reading as a means to an end. So I'm reading just to find material to use in my books. And I don't like that. And I don't feel good when I do that. And I don't think it actually, as it happens, makes for very good books. It's like a musician has to listen to music, but to find ideas, to find things, whatever. But, you know, the reward for being a professional music shouldn't be that you lose the experience of listening to music for its own sake. And so when I read, I try to just read like it's a book that I'm just picking up like a normal person. And as I go through, I find all sorts of stuff that I like, you know, a fact that I didn't know, a story that I like. I try to read without an eye towards any specific thing, but then always also to be open for stuff that I can use, which I guess goes to the point that someone was asking earlier, like, how do I know what book to read next? I try not to think that much about it, right? Like, I know that I am writing a book about justice, but I also know historically a lot of the best things that I've put in my books have been from stuff from a novel that I read or from some totally different, like, you never know when you're going to bump into something that becomes very, very beneficial. And so I do try to just, I do try to just read what interests me, what gets me excited, what intrigues me, and follow that where it leads me, as opposed to really intentionally reading for, you know, what I need for my books. Naomi.
Hey, Ryan.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Hey, so I'm currently working on this project. I mentioned it before on some of the other platforms, but a good friend of mine with a large library, they got attacked by mice. And so the mice wrecked a bunch of stuff, but so we're sorting through, and there's like a vast amount of books there, and I'm trying to sort them. I love what you said about don't do it by color, do it by size. But I found this one, and I also don't really know, like, sometimes I find older books hard to read or from different writing styles. Do you call your style by a specific name? Not really genre, but your style of writing. Like, obviously it's English, but do you have any other pronouns that you describe for your books?
Not really. I guess it would be some people like, it's funny, sometimes in a bookstore I see them in the self-help section, sometimes they're in the business section, sometimes they're in the philosophy section. I don't really know. I don't have that much control over it, honestly. So I don't think about it too much. But it is funny. Another book recommendation you're mentioning these books getting eaten by mice. One of my favorite books that talks a lot about these questions is a Susan Orlean book called The Library Book, which, Billy, if you can link to, because I know we carry it in the Painted Porch. It's about the Great Library Fire at the Los Angeles Public Library in the 1980s. That may have been arson. It may have just been a tragic accident. Sort of the more you think about it, the less clear it is. But Susan Orlean, one of the great writers of our time, if you've ever seen the movie Adaptation, it's loosely inspired by her book, The Orchid Thief. Anyways, great book, and very much recommend The Library Book. Again, no right or wrong answers, but there's a lot of fun, cool questions in that book. Mark.
Last question. Can I ask you one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you gonna offer autographed books of your new book when it comes out? Should we have to wait?
No, I will. I was just going through this with the publisher. Ideally, what they do is they send me blank pages and I sign the blank pages and then they get bound into the book. And it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So I'm going to have to go to the printer at some point in August and sign tens of thousands of copies as they come off the printer. So there is a plan to do that. It's not as easy as I would like to be, but it will be part of the pre-order. So thank you for asking.
Okay, thank you.
Mark.
Hey, Ryan.
Hi.
Hey, so I got a question.
Yeah.
I'm having some challenges with regards to the actual recording of the kind of key takeaways from books into my commonplace book, if you would.
Sure.
I don't think it matters which tool, but I'm kind of inclined to go more digital,
sure,
kind of Zettelkasten type tools like mem.ai or Roam or something like that. And my challenge is I'm wondering whether I'm trying to capture, convert too many thoughts from a book. Like you just mentioned, like in a 300-page book, there might be 10 passages that really resonate with you. In a good 300-page book, I could have like 100, 50 to 100 things that I've got, kind of, highlights and notations around. And so what's challenging me is going back and reviewing that after I've read the book. That's not a problem. But then translating that into like a commonplace book, that seems like a really, time-consuming task that, quite frankly, I'd rather move on to another book and be using for reading.
Yeah. One of the reasons I kind of do as part of my process, so I read the book. I try not to think about anything other than what do I like? What am I learning? What's interesting about this book? And then the reason I set it aside, and this is something Robert Greene told me, is the reason I set it aside for a couple of weeks is so that when I come back and there's definitely books where, like, look, I read this. This is a book I reread, but this is a book called For Reasonable Men, and it has a really good essay about Marcus Aurelius at the beginning. So just the Marcus Aurelius chapter, I did this many notes. Like I folded it. So almost every page. And some of these pages, I have an arrow saying like also on the next page. So anyways, I'm somewhat dreading going back through that book because I know there's going to be a lot of note cards. So I pause. Part of the reason I pause though is so that when I go back and read it, I'm a little more selective that second time. And I'm just because I mark something doesn't mean that I need to take it down. It's just that it was intriguing to me. I was flagging it for review. There might be nothing there, right? You think about it like an X-ray technician looks at they're like, could be something here, could be something here, could be something here. And then the doctor looks at it, right? I'm just flagging it for attention. I do try to, though, as I look at it, I go, am I not writing this down because I don't think that I'll need it and it's not that important? Or am I just being lazy, right? And so that is attention. But just because you noted it doesn't mean you have to do something with it.
So your filter is, if it's something that's important that you want to, kind of reprocess at some point, at some future point.
And look, like the fact that you noted it or that you marked it down is valuable in and of itself. Like there was some books that as I was writing Courage is Calling that I went back through and I had done my notes, but I didn't do everything. But when I needed to really go back through that book, it turned out I'd already done some of the work that I needed.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you.
Marion, you got to unmute there.
I see that.
Hi.
I did it. Hi. Yesterday, when I started using my commonplace book for the first time, from a book that I know I'm going to be taking a lot of notes for a research project, I realized that doing that and then putting them on the note cards, which I know I'll need for organizational purposes, doesn't make a lot of sense. So I was wondering, am I losing a lot of benefit by not putting it in both places? That's one of my questions. I have a couple.
Yeah,
related.
I mean, I like my version of this is sometimes I like, for instance, I'll note something and I'll be like, this could work for this, but it also works for this. And then I go, well, which category should it go in? And then I go, you know what? I'm just going to do it twice. I'd rather get the redundancy, and the fact of doing it twice is also beneficial in and of itself. So again, there's no right or wrong way to do this, but I do err on the side of more than less.
Yeah, but I guess my question was, if I don't do the commonplace book entries, is it good enough to just do the cards?
Oh, I mean, for me, my commonplace book is the note cards. I just do it all on the note cards. Yes.
Okay, I thought for when
so
you
it's
said,
not literally a book for me. It is a collection of note
great.
cards.
That's very helpful.
But do it however you like. Yes.
Yeah, and then do you put references on each card so that you can look, because I'll have to cite what I'm doing.
Yeah. So like this one, it says Sandel, which is the author of the book. The title is a book about justice, and then it says see page 240. So I usually write some sort of page 20. Sometimes it'll be an article or what. I try to be very, unless there's nothing to be citing, I try to always write a reference or a source. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I would say one thing, sometimes the passage that I'm reading, it just spurs an original thought for me. And so I'm just writing that down. What the author did was cue up a thought or an idea for me. And that's just a note card that I'm writing down that I want that idea, but I'm not recording anything from anyone else.
Mm-hmm. Do you use the commonplace book, not the note cards, when you're just jotting down something from this book and something from this book or something else? Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
Yes. Did you have another question?
I asked you all three of them.
All right. Someone's asking, will this be available later? I don't know if we can record the comments, but I think we can record the tape we'll be definitely sending the tape. And then what we try to do is send an email of all the stuff that's been recommended throughout the challenge. So stay tuned for that as well. Scott, how's it going?
Hey, Ryan, thanks for doing this. I'm a huge fan and I'm getting a lot out of this. It's nice to learn that other people are struggling with some reading too.
Yep.
My question is, when you first start a book, do you have a plan of attack on first starting a book? Do you peruse it first, or do you go over, individual chapters first, or how do you attack that?
It depends. I was talking about this book. If it's just some regular book that just came out, maybe I read the back cover and then I just get into the book. If I'm reading some Greek play that I'm not classically trained in, I'm going to read the Wikipedia page first, or a New York book review article about, or I'm going to really read the introduction and the preface. If the book is a hard or difficult book, I may lay some groundwork so I know what's happening. And we'll talk a little bit about this in the challenge. I like to, if it's something that I know is going to be a bit above my level or a bit of a stretch, I don't hesitate to ruin the ending, right? To figure out what happened, get the storyline. So then I'm really actually clued into what's happening, not spinning around, confused and without bearings.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, we'll definitely talk more about that for sure. Lori.
Yeah, so you've addressed some of this, but this was your
there you go.
Stillness is the key is the one I started with. And 1 out of every 3 pages is dog-eared and I've dribbled all over it. So in my professional life, previously, I did everything digitally and I put things into Evernote and I captured quotes and I did all that sort of stuff. And when I retired and I started doing more writing, I promised myself I was going to move away from digital so I could hear myself think.
Sure.
Out of this, as I started moving them into the note cards, I found out of just this one book, 25 different themes, completely discrete and different themes. And what I'm curious about is does that evolve over time? Is that a reflection of what you're interested in right now? Is that monkey mind? What is that I was able to find that many distinctly different areas of interest that I wanted to capture for use some other day? And does that change over time, or does that does that end up being a diagnostic that you can find yourself getting stale if you're not contributing things to more themes? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I do tend to find that my interests narrow when I've like picked up the scent of something, right? So it tends to be, it's kind of like the confirmation bias working for you as you're writing about or thinking about or doing something. Like if I was starting a company and I'd just been promoted to some position of leadership, it may be that what I'm primarily finding in those books is that thing that I need, right? So obviously my situation is a little bit different in that I'm usually working on a book. So I find my interests are narrowing. But I would say with my book specifically, I'm trying to pick a large theme and then divide them into sub themes that I'm doing a quick meditation on. So like the fact that you picked up all those themes, it's like, it's funny. Like, so I read hundreds of books, split that out into thousands of note cards. That turned into that book. And then you've now broken it back down into, hundreds of note cards with 25 themes. So to me, that's really exciting and interesting because like what a book is years of concentrated energy and focus, but also a broad swath of research from somebody that you want to hear from. And then you're taking that and breaking it up into your own stuff. So I don't know if there's anything right or wrong with how you're doing it. I think it's important.
Excellent. Thanks.
Yeah. Somebody's saying that if they aren't sure they're going to purchase a book, they use Blinkist, which gives you summaries. I agree. I like Blinkist. I'm actually, they're sponsors of the Daily Stoic podcast, and I'm about to do some cool stuff with them. But yeah, Blinkist is another great way where you're like, you're finding ways to get to the gist of what's happening. So then you really get your time out of it when you sit down and read the book. Hopefully, Todd, that answers your question, which is why are people looking at something like Blinkist, isn't it SparkNotes? To me, it only works as part of a larger reading practice or as a way to eliminate books that you're not going to spend more time with. Jose.
Hey Ryan, how you doing? Hope you're doing
you?
great today. Just want to say thank you for uploading great content on YouTube. It's really been helping me lately.
Oh, appreciate it. It's fun.
So I have a couple of questions for you today.
Yeah.
First, I want to ask you, how long after reading the book and underlining and highlighting information that we thought was important, how long should we wait to come back and transcribe it to our commonplace book?
I usually wait a couple weeks, but that's schedule permitting. But if it was, I needed to write about it right now, I might do it tomorrow. Again, these are not hard and fast rules, but I do suggest giving it a little bit of breathing room.
Okay. Another question would be, what do we do with the information we have transcribed into our commonplace book?
Use it in your life as a person. That's the idea to me, is that I am finding ways to not just repeat it, right? It's not just, hey, this will make for a good dinner conversation or anecdote in a talk or a story in a book or go in a memo or something. I think the idea is you're trying to collect information that you can use in your life. Seneca, in one of his letters to Lucilius, talks about how the art of philosophy is it's like finding one thing each day that makes you a little bit better. And their letters back and forth, if you notice, Seneca will say, and here's the quote that I owe you, right? That's what he and Lucilius are doing, is they're exchanging this one thing a day that hopefully gives them something to chew on, think about, apply, improve, strive towards. That's, to me, what the purpose of all of this is about.
Yeah, that was a good answer. That does bring me to my next question about applying what we have read to our lives, because specifically I've been reading The Laws of Human Nature.
Yes.
And I really wanted to ask you, do you have any advice on how to apply that kind of stuff, information to your life? Because I can resonate with a lot of stuff that he's talking about in that book.
Yeah, to me, what Laws of Human Nature is really about is understanding how people and groups of people operate, because life is what? Nothing but dealing with people and groups of people. And so it's about understanding the forces that are, it'd be like, look, if you were going to travel to some foreign country, you would want to understand how the weather is there, how traffic works, how, what system of money do they use, or whatever. You'd want to understand the conditions and the terrain of the place you're going. And so as you operate inside your business, as you operate inside a marriage, as you operate inside a neighborhood, understanding how humans are, how they operate, what human nature primes us for or makes us prone to do, that's what you would be reading that book for, and what it would be helping you as far as application goes.
Okay. Real quick, just two more questions. They'll be quick, Ryan. So what sort of notes should we be writing in the margins? Because I hear you speak about that a lot.
I usually just, I'll write if I agree, I'll write if I disagree, I'll write if it a word or something that it connects to for me. Usually noting connections that I'm making between what I just read and something else that I've read or know.
Okay. But how do you determine what information that you want that's worthy of transcribing into your commonplace book?
I mean, there's no worthy or unworthy, like some objective standard. It's what do you need? So what I would take out of the laws of human nature might be different than what you would take out of the laws of human nature, which might be different than what a politician or a police officer or a priest would take out of the laws of human nature. So it depends on the context in which you live and work. Just like a really cynical person versus a really generous, earnest person would take something different out of that book. So it's whatever, makes sense for you.
All right. Thank you very much for answering my questions,
Awesome.
Ryan.
Appreciate it. Michael, let's no pressure, but let's call this the last question.
Sounds good.
All right.
Great to meet you. So as a teenager in my 20s, never read any books, maybe one or two, mostly self-help books, helped me a lot. But once I got, Audible came around, and I watched Max Joseph's video you sent out last week about bookstores and how to, count your books you have left. So I went into my Audible and saw how many books I've read since my 40s to now, my 50s. And I'm at like 240, Audible books, right?
Yeah, sure.
So
that's great.
Thanks. I know you love, books, and I watched that guy sitting there reading the book with his finger, the speed reader guy. And I thought, am I missing anything? I will write, I'll highlight some things, in my Audible app. Sometimes I'll even play Kindle and have Siri read it to me, right? And I just absorb the books. I was able to go through Robert Caro's book, Power Broker, no problem. I wouldn't have done that before. So am I missing something by not, getting into paper, right? And just
look, you're not missing anything when we're comparing this to your previous situation of not reading, right? So like we did this book signing at the bookstore for this guy, Jack Carr, who writes these big sort of spy fiction novels. And anyway, someone came up and they said, same thing. I hadn't read a book since high school. I'm 40. Somebody told me I would like these books. And, now he reads these 500-page novels like in a week or whatever. Right. Like you, also Audible. What I have found is that there are a lot of people who thought they didn't like books, but really they didn't like reading. They didn't like reading and holding a book. Like their brain and personality, it's different, right? And so that's why I try not to be snooty or judgmental about the process by which people do it. We learn different ways, right? Like I personally have trouble following audiobooks. The way my mind works, if an audiobook is going, I start to tune it out. Whereas like when I listen to a podcast, I learn a lot because the two people talking, I find that stimulates my brain. So I think having some awareness about how one learns is a huge skill that we don't value enough, right? People go, oh, well, this is what smart people do, or this is how this person does it. That's the right way to do it.
I do worry I'm going to miss my commonplace book, though, by not being able to make notes and things like that.
I know I think there are certain advantages, but again, in your case, we're contrasting this to, it's like, look, I like running. That's how I stay in shape. If you were like, but I blew out both my knees, I'd be like, well, have you thought about swimming? I'd push you towards a different activity that would get you a lot of the same benefits. That would also be conducive to your situation, your inclinations, etc. Right? So there are, of course, ways to do it, and maybe you'll just have to figure out a way to do the commonplace book with what you listen to. But what's the most important thing here? The most important thing is exposing yourself to ideas and to books. The form in which one does that is secondary.
Okay, thank you.
Amazing. Well, guys, we're going to talk a lot more about all this stuff throughout the challenge. I'm really excited. Of course, this is what I love talking and thinking about. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for books. And I think I know that's true for a lot of you. So I'm excited. We're going to have this conversation about books over the next couple weeks. I'm really pumped that everyone's in it. I'd say a couple notes. Remember, we do send out the archive of this. Sorry for the problems logging in. We will try to send out an email that collects all the stuff that we've recommended throughout the challenge. If you have customer service issues, just email store@dailystoic.com. It's not a huge team over here, so that they take a while to chip through them. But I will say, and I just try to remind people of this because it's not always intuitive. If you have a problem and then you follow up about the problem, it puts you in the back of the line because they're going through it chronologically, right? So just hang on, we'll get to it. And if there's a problem or you feel like you missed out on something, we'll make it right. Awesome. Well, I'll talk to all of you soon. Thank you so much. And be well and safe, everyone.